made these granny squares in January because that's when my sister's baby was due, and it's now April and I still haven't done it. But since we're going to Scotland tomorrow and we'll see my sister and her not quite so newborn baby, I need to get cracking. I've got my joining yarn, I've got my 4mm hook, and then what I'm going to do is follow my roadmap for joining the granny squares. I will also link to a blog post so that you can have a look at all of the information relating to Join As You Go and the blank. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. Here's a close-up of the map I'm going to follow to join my granny squares. It's pretty evident what you need to do. We start here in this corner with this granny square, do some up and down and around, and continue that pattern until we finish back where we started. Before we do that, what I want to do is lay out my granny squares in an order that I think looks really pretty and nicely balanced, so that the colours of every square are evenly distributed within the blanket as a whole. And what I mean by that is make sure that if you've got lots of different colours, don't sit the same colours next to each other. I have another video about choosing colours for granny squares that will help you with that as well. I think in terms of the layout, this is fine. I'm panicking a little bit because I'm in a rush. I can't see anything glaringly obvious, but if you do spot two colours sitting next to each other or the balance is off, please don't judge me. I will kick myself later, but the baby's not going to care, so let's just let it go. As per the granny map, I'm going to start right at the top here, work my way around. I don't need to worry about these ones at the bottom first, so I'm just going to, in the order that they are laid out in, I'm just going to set them aside. I've got square number 1, and I'm going to join the contrast yarn, the border yarn, as I might ordinarily do, chain 3, or use another method to join your yarn if you prefer. Work 2 US double crochets, that's UK trebles, and then granny along. I have grannied along the top edge, done a cluster, chain 2, cluster in the corner, work down to the next corner, just one cluster in there so far, chain 1, and then the fun begins when we want to join it to the next square. So yarn over, insert your hook into what's going to be the bottom of this square's corner, and insert your hook. The right side of the square is showing, so you're effectively working a cluster into that space, so it looks like that currently. The next maneuver is to slip stitch into the gap between these clusters, the first and the second cluster of our very first granny square. So insert your hook, slip stitch through, and then you can granny and slip stitch to join as you go. The clue is in the name. When we get to the top, slip stitch in there as well, into that corner, slip stitch 1, and you can chain 1 as well if you like, and then complete the cluster, the second cluster of the corner. The brilliant thing about continuous join as you go is that you don't have to cut and rejoin yarn. You're using one long length of yarn. That's no ends to sew in. Apart from the first and the last, obviously. And if you're doing loads of stash busting for the middles, that's more than enough ends to sew in. So by the time you get to this stage, you're worn out from all the end sewing. It's a relief, sweet relief to not have to bother anymore. Just enjoy the crochet. So I've just gone down the second side of the second square, chain 1, and then we repeat the process. Grab your next square, it's right side up, yarn over as if you're going to do the double crochet that you're going to do. That's UK treble, by the way. And if it's okay with you, I'm just going to refer to them as stitches from now on. So again, it looks the same. You've completed the first cluster in a corner on your square. The next manoeuvre is to slip stitch into the corresponding space of the other square, and then cluster and join, cluster and join. First cluster of a corner at the end, join with a slip stitch to the chain space, that corner chain space, and then chain 1, complete the corner. Whoops. So I'm going to go along here, back down, do the same process with this one, and then we'll do the next bit. So row 1, squares have been joined. I worked all the way around 3 sides of the end granny, and now I can turn it upside down. And we're going to work all along the straight edge of these first 4 grannies. And to do so, we need to build the stitches in these joins as well. Finish the corner here with a second cluster to meet its first cluster. Chain 1, and I just join in this space here with a slip stitch, and then another chain 1 to begin the cluster, the second cluster in this corner space. And that is repeated at every junction, every set of corners, you do the same. It's amazing how quickly this granny square join method is worked up. I love it. But when you're using all one colour, continuous join as you go is brilliant. So let's repeat the process at the next corner. So it's a cluster in the corner. Chain 1, slip stitch in this space, chain 1, work a cluster in the next corner, and continue. So repeat that all the way along. Here we go, job done. So I'm upside down with this lot at the moment. I've just worked all along here, and this is where we started, and we have gone up and down, around, down, up, around, down, up, around, and then all the way along the bottom. So, oops. So now we get our next set of 4, and we want to join these ones. So we'll do that. The next one to come is this one, and we want to join to this corner here. So I'm just going to move these out of the way. Right, so here's the top. We're going to join this one to this one. So I'm just going to twiddle it around so it's more comfortable to work. Yarn over, insert your hook into the corner of the square, which is right side up. Yarn over and work a stitch. And you're now joined. They are joined forever. Work your cluster, turn it, and then you can slip stitch into the corresponding space. Insert the hook between the chain, between the clusters, slip stitch to join, and voila, next row is started. That's my heating. If you can hear a clicking, it's my heating coming on. It's a chilly-ish day in April. It's been hailing. Right, so let's have a look at it. We're going to work down here in a minute, but before we do, we join it to the last corner. And then chain 1, and then we're going to add another cluster in there and work to the bottom, and it's the same as before, just granny, granny, granny. And this one is going to go in here in this space. So again, it's the same principle, and I think you've hopefully by now you've probably got the gist, because the idea of it is trickier than the doing, I reckon. My main issue at the moment is that I've got this deep teal and gold colour in both squares, and it makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, but it's too late to change it now. I'm just going to go with it. I've got no choice now. So I'm just going to crochet up to here. I've reached this point where we're going to work the corner. There's not much that's different, just the joining, the slip stitching, I suppose. So we're anchoring it to this square and this square. So those are the only 2 corners where I'm going to slip stitch. I don't bother slip stitching into this one as well. I think that would just create bulk, and you don't need to. So I'm going to insert my hook into this one to slip stitch to join first, and then the second corner, which is this one, slip stitch, and make sure that your stitches aren't too loose, your yarn's not loose, because that would last forever. Then you might have a loose join, and you don't want one of those. Then you complete the second cluster once you've done your slip stitches. And then slip stitch to join as you go. It's funny because the technique, I keep saying join as you go, and that's the name of the technique because it does what it says on the tin. Let's have a look at that bit. Okay, and that's your join. And if you are going to block your blanket afterwards, which is advisable, then it will look something like that. I haven't blocked my squares, don't judge me. As you know, I'm in a hurry. I can always wash this when I've gifted it. I think I'll be forgiven. And then it will look a bit more relaxed and less scrunched up. So have you got the gist? Do you think you'd be able to do this technique for granny squares, etc.? I just think it's really satisfying because it's so quick to work up. Really, the only difference between the first row and the second row is that you are incorporating the join across the top as well. And then it's just this last row here where you're not joining it to anything, not until you come back to it for the next square. We work down to the bottom, then you introduce the third square, then you repeat the process for the fourth square, and then you repeat the joining technique that you used across the bottom of the first set of squares. So we're just doing that again and again for as many squares as you have, many rows. At this point, what I'm going to do is attach a stitch marker to my start point so I know which way up my blanket is. I know it seems silly on a small scale project like this, but if you're working on a much bigger blanket, you can get turned around really easily and lose where you are and lose the order of squares and things like that. So by adding a stitch marker, you always know where your start point is, and that's going to help you. Anyway, I don't think you need to see the rest of this on camera because it's all repeating the instructions that have already been demonstrated. So all we're doing is building these squares one by one. And if you do happen to go wrong, then it's easy to undo and start again. And another top tip would be just to take a step back every square or two and check that you're on the right path and you haven't skipped any slip stitches, which I've done in the past.
Do you reckon is it a noticeable difference? With no light.
You're poking it. I told you not to touch it.
Light versus no light.
Oh yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I can't fit it all in now, but here is my starting point. I have worked all 4 rows and followed the map until I'm here. I'm currently here, having worked all of this, and the last step is the same as this step here, working the last side of the outside. I had a tea break and this is where I was. So in the corner I chained 2. Once you get your head around the slip stitches, and I think actually the worst bit is that initial stitch you make to join one new square to the rest of it. That's when my head can get turned upside down sometimes. But once you get into the swing of it, it's actually quite easy and becomes intuitive once everything's clicked. The next steps would be entirely your choice, and that means, you know, what kind of border are you going to add. In my case, I think I'm going to do a scallop edging, just because that's what my gut is telling me to go for. I could use a bobble stitch as well, which I am drawn to again and again, but for this one, because I didn't mean to chain, and actually I tend not to do chains in between my clusters, because I think you can if you're a tight crocheter and you want extra drape, sure, go ahead, but I actually don't like the additional looseness of the granny. Granny is loose enough, quite frankly. She needs to be brought in line, so I do not add chains between my clusters just for that reason, but that is personal preference. The only time I add chains is here, really, at corners. And I add one when I'm slip stitching, because I sort of think that the slip stitch counts as a chain, and if you do too many chains, again, there's too much chain. We're back at the beginning now, so I can remove this stitch marker because I know that I have completed around the whole blanket. So it's one cluster in that final corner, which is also the first corner. Chain 2 and then join with a slip stitch to the 3 chain. At this point you could cut your yarn and fasten off, but presumably you're going to want to add a border, maybe go round a few more times and then add a scallop border or bubbles or what have you. So that's what it looks like once it's finished, which I think is a really tidy finish to a granny blanket. And just so you know as well, this is how much I have left from the yarn I had. I don't know if you remember, but I had 2 full balls and then I had a scraggly bit that was about 25 grams. I used the scraggly bit, then I opened the first new ball of wool, and this is how much I have left. So one ball could easily do maybe even twice as much as what I've done here, which is a 4x4 blanket. So that's really good to know, that this amount of yarn will go a decent way through to making a blanket. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again. Bye.